Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we're so glad to have you here. With just days to go before Governor Mikie Sherrill delivers her first ever budget address to the state legislature on March 10th, the Garden State is staring down a projected $3 billion structural deficit. The new governor has sounded the alarm, warning that current spending trends could wipe out state reserves by mid-2028, while vowing tough cuts to government programs but no new taxes. To help break it down from the Democratic perspective, standing by is former New Jersey legislator John Wisniewski, a 22-year veteran of the legislature, former Transportation Committee chair, and frequent voice on state issues. First, though, State Senator Republican leader Anthony Bucco has already credited the governor for her early transparency, and he's offered bipartisan support to help rein in spending. Senator Anthony Bucco, welcome. So good to see you.
It's great to see you.
Okay, so it's been, 6 weeks? We've inaugurated a new governor, had 2 history-making snowstorms, and we're knee-deep into the budget. Got a budget address coming up in just a few days. That's quite a bit happening in New Jersey.
I am sure the governor feels like she's drinking out of a fire hose at this point in time.
Yeah. But you've had a lot, as a Republican leader, you've praised the governor for her transparency in recent statements. So let's talk a little bit about, where the rubber really meets the road and having to deal with the budget. The budget address is coming up. Do you believe Governor Mikie Sherrill and her approach is marking a real shift in Trenton? And do you feel hopeful?
Look, I do feel hopeful. I said from the very beginning that the Republicans wish her well, and we hope that she succeeds. If she succeeds, the state succeeds. And that's what we're all looking for, right? And we're here to help. In fact, I sent her a letter offering our help in the budget process. Our budget committee members sent over a bunch of reforms that we have been asking for years now, and suggested to her that if she needs to take corrective action, which clearly she does, she should consider the reforms that we've proposed over the years. This day has been coming, and Republicans have been saying it now for the last 4 years, that you can't spend at the rate the state has been spending and not hit a fiscal cliff. And in fact, we have.
Yeah.
So I think she recognizes that. I think the press is now recognizing that. In fact, I saw a big article, a headline said something like, Republicans were right. Listen, this is something that we've seen coming, and we've warned the prior administration. I think the prior administration is going to be seen as an administration of missed opportunities. During the COVID crisis, the state was lucky enough to obtain over $8 billion of federal funding that could have helped solve many of the structural deficits that Governor Sherrill is going to face in this budget.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that money was squandered. And it's unfortunate because it's going to impact the residents in New Jersey. And like I said before, it was preventable. The Republicans were offering ways to prevent it, but we were ignored. I hope that during this administration, we'll be given a seat at the table.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the key reforms that you're suggesting, or spending reductions? Mikie Sherrill has said we're not going to raise taxes. What are you suggesting on the Republican side now that we're at this point?
We've been saying for a long time now that the school funding formula is broken. We see schools all over the state that are in dire straits as a result of the school funding formula, while other schools are receiving more than they need. So we need to get that school funding formula under control. We need to address the state health benefits plan. So, those are just 2 things. We can't afford to have these one-shot revenue boosters anymore, because the following year you end up that much shorter. We're hopeful that she will embrace some of the recommendations that we've made. We'll continue to make them. We'll continue to work with the administration. But most importantly, I hope that she does move forward with her words in actions by having spending restraint and not resulting to tax increases, because that will cripple our economy and it will just cripple our residents. I mean, the
Right.
cost of living here in New Jersey is off of the charts, and we need to do whatever we can to bring it back in line.
So much of the budget goes to education, yet I know your district in particular is in a real crisis when it comes to some of the school funding or lack of funding that they are getting. So when the governor talks about no new taxes and cutting other programs, what happens when the bills still have to be paid and then it gets passed down to the local level? What happens? We've done other shows on this talking about yours in particular, how schools are shutting down. They're having to cut programs. They're having to cut sports. They're having to cut some of the most fundamental things that help students not only succeed in high school, but get them college scholarships, that give them a hope and a future.
Listen, students should not be worried about how their schools are going to be funded. So, whatever we need to do to get this back on track, we need to do. And the school funding formula is a major part of that. So, we're rolling up our sleeves. We're ready to help the governor get this budget across the finish line. But it's really going to require her to have spending restraint, and we hope that she continues to move in that direction. I think we've hit a point in time here in New Jersey where we really need to decide in our budget what we have to do, what we'd like to do, and what we can no longer afford to do. And that's going to take some difficult decisions, and it's going to take courage on her part to make those changes.
So the governor, she said, she would like to move away from some of these one-offs, right? But ultimately, it's the legislature that's got to come up with a plan. The governor, being one of the most powerful in the country, then can sign the budget. They can line item veto. They have a lot of power. But when it comes, again, you've mentioned about these one-offs. And again, Republicans have long criticized past budgets for similar gimmicks. Do you see change coming? All right, because again, the governor can say one thing, but the Democrats in the legislature may not see eye to eye. What are you hearing? What are the rumblings, perhaps, in the halls of the legislature?
One of the things that concerns me, and I also know it concerns our budget officer, Senator O'Scanlan, is the use of the surplus, right? If we tap the surplus out to close these structural deficits, that'll be a big mistake, because we don't get that money back. And if the economy starts to tank and revenues start to dip, we'll be even in an even worse position. So, the Sherrill administration needs to really hope that that the economy nationwide continues to grow, because if it doesn't, that'll have a direct impact on the revenues that are produced here in New Jersey. So it's important that that we avoid using the surplus and taking other one-shot revenue sources to close this budget gap, because next year will be even worse than this year, and then they'll be forced to raise taxes if they're not already at that point at this point.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's been 8 years of complete Democrat control, and unfortunately, I think folks are seeing the result of that. When we had all that excess money, we weren't getting the budget until minutes before it had to be voted on. Nobody had enough. There was no transparency, and then the legislature, not with Republican votes, but the legislature the Democrats would add another $1 billion of spending on top of what the governor even asked for.
As we're coming into the budget, how should the upcoming budget prioritize, relief for taxpayer and, prioritize and best do that so, you don't cut what is important and needed for the people of New Jersey?
Well, one of those programs, Stay New Jersey, right, is our premier property tax relief program. Right now, there's not enough money in the surplus for that program to move forward. if that happens or that program is changed to lower the amount of benefits that are going out, especially to our seniors, that's going to be a real problem. So, we have to be extremely careful here on how we approach this budget process. And I hope that the state New Jersey program, it doesn't get axed as a result of the position that the Democrats have put the state in. Yeah. Because if it does, that's going to affect every taxpayer in the state. And that's going to be unfortunate because, again, when you add on top the increase for electricity, the increase for car insurance, the increase for healthcare costs, all of these things, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. You have to, at some point in time, we have to get control of this budget, get control of the spending, and essentially start dealing with these cost of living items individually and not worry about gimmicks to try to offset some of the costs that our taxpayers are facing. We just got to have sound fiscal management.
Yeah. Final thoughts here. You seem to be very optimistic, but again, this is really where the rubber meets the road. The clock is ticking to that June 30th deadline. What are your overall thoughts and a message that you would like to leave taxpayers with as the legislature really starts to roll their sleeves up and gets to work on balancing that budget?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. We're ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work. I hope that the governor includes the Republican Party in that process. Again, I think we've proven over time that we've got great ideas for reforms that can help New Jersey in the long term. And that's what it's all about. People want both parties to work together. And we've offered that olive branch. We're sincere about it. And we're optimistic that this governor will finally take us up on that offer.
Senator Anthony Bucco, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Play it like the New York Sirens. Live in the spotlight. Etch your name in lights. Embrace the noise. And when it calls you, turn it up. Get louder. Play it like they'll hear us everywhere. Because this is our team. New York Sirens. Play it big.
Welcome back to New Jersey politics. And with just days until Governor Mikey Sherrill's first budget address on March 10th, New Jersey faces a projected $3 billion structural deficit. The governor has warned that unchecked spending could drain the state's reserves by mid-2028. So she's calling for tough program cuts ahead, but no new taxes on residents. Joining me now to help break it down is former New Jersey legislator John Wisniewski. It's good to see you. How have you been doing?
Well, Laura, how are you? You survived all the snow?
We are indeed. Well, I mean, Governor Mikey Sherrill has had to survive 2 snowstorms right off the bat, and in the middle of it, she's got to get ready for that budget address coming up. And she's been up front saying there's a $3 billion structural deficit, and there's a risk of draining the reserves. So, as somebody who's seen many, many budget cycles, do you view this? How do you view this?
Well, it's a very difficult position for a new governor to be in, and a lot of the blame has to go to the past administration. It doesn't happen overnight that a new governor winds up with a $3 billion shortfall. That's something that's been baked in over the last several budget years that Phil Murphy presided over. And so she's now got to bring back fiscal discipline, and I think she can do it, but it's not an easy task.
Yeah. She has talked about moving away from those temporary patches or the one-shot revenues and more sustainable solutions. You've chaired key committees you've run statewide. What areas do you think that need the most scrutiny for potential savings without undermining essential services? And New Jersey, it's under constitutional obligation. You must have a balanced budget.
Well, and that's not just the only constitutional obligation. You have an obligation to provide a thorough and efficient education, which means the state of New Jersey is spending $12 to $15 billion on education. There are the mandatory pension contributions. And when you add up all of the things that are baked in because of mandatory obligations, the discretionary part of the budget only is about 10%. And so the governor is obviously going to have to look heavily into that discretionary area, but also some of the long-term programs on how greater efficiencies can be achieved. I remember back when John Corzine was governor, there was a panel, bipartisan, bicameral panels on shared services and consolidation of municipalities. When you consider there's a lot of money that the state of New Jersey collects and then sends back out to the 1,300 units of government in New Jersey, that's an area that I think the governor can look at to try to achieve some savings that may not deliver a lot on day one, but over the course of her first term will achieve considerable savings.
Well, New Jersey is a home rule state, and I want to make sure that I understand you correctly. It's very, very difficult. Like on paper, like sharing services makes so much sense. But when push comes to shove, I will never forget the former Assembly Speaker, Jack Collins used to say, New Jerseyans want lower property taxes, but they really don't want lower property taxes, meaning they just didn't want to give up that home rule. They like their local schools. They like their local police department. And sharing services, that's something that's really, really challenging. Can the state really do anything to encourage that?
The state can do a lot to encourage it, but I also think the state has to do more in explaining it. Right? On the surface, and I co-chaired one of those committees back then, and the message was the same. There were many, many people who came to those committees and said shared services and consolidation makes sense. There are too many governmental entities in New Jersey, but let me tell you how special my town is.
Right.
And I think we need to have a really pragmatic discussion about what we are paying for and how so many duplications create so much excess expense. As I said, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think that she's the kind of governor that can really make the case as to that is part, not the only solution, but that is part of the solutions to be able to balance a budget and not raise taxes.
Yeah. Mikey Sherrill has committed to no new taxes on residents. So from your experience, how realistic is it to close that gap on the size through cuts alone? Because like you mentioned, there's only about 10% that you can play with. You've got rising costs in Medicaid, pensions, school age, programs like Stay and J, property tax relief. How do you strike that balance?
It's not easy. And in a perfect world, no candidate would run for office and make the declaration that I will never increase your taxes, because we've seen how when a office holder goes back on those promises, it can have very bad consequences. But the reality is that in New Jersey, there is a lot of demand on government, and very frequently it is very simple to say, well, we're going to cut revenue. I mean, remember, under the Christie administration, New Jersey got rid of the estate tax, and that was billions of dollars that New Jersey gave up because of that. It was a political move by Chris Christie, but long-term consequences for Governor Murphy and now Governor Sherrill. I think that there has to be, again, a discussion about what do we want to buy as a state? What do we want to pay for? And I think, as pointed out, a lot of that stuff's already baked in, but who's going to pay for it? And I think that there are things that can be reformed to make sure that the cost of government is being put not on the average working man and woman, but the people that are making huge profits because of the advantages that New Jersey provides for the location of their business and their enterprises.
Well, and another issue, is, well, you may not raise taxes at the state level, but then at the local level, it gets passed on there. And property taxes, affordability, these are issues that we have heard. There are always perennial issues in New Jersey. Now, the governor's preview of her budget address is suggesting that there are going to be some tough choices ahead. So how should Democrats in the legislature, how do both sides protect working middle-class taxpayers while addressing these structural issues that she keeps talking about?
Well, I think one of the things that the legislature has to stay away from is the easy gamesmanship it can devolve into about finger pointing and saying, you see, I told you, you shouldn't have made those expenditures 2 years ago or whatever. Because at the end of the day, it's not the class of individuals serving in the legislature that are going to feel most of the pain here. It's going to be the people that live and vote and work in New Jersey. And that discussion has to be mindful of what they're going to experience. I think both sides have to agree that there has to be a way of making New Jersey government more efficient. And I'm not talking about, the traditional three horsemen of the apocalypse, waste, fraud, and abuse, but about talking about how we pay for government. Does it make sense, for instance? Does it really make sense that education, the biggest part of your property tax bill is education. Does it make sense that we should have 560 different ways of raising money? Each different municipality has a different municipal tax rate, different valuations to pay for education? Or is that really a statewide priority? That might make it cheaper. That might make it more affordable for people in the state of New Jersey. I think some of those hard discussions, that's one of them. But I think it's time that New Jersey had those discussions.
Well, and a lot of times when I'm down there covering a budget address, legislators themselves are confused on the school funding formula. You talk about all those school districts, and it's a very confusing thing, even for those making the decisions to understand. How do you deal with the transparency, and how do you think that Governor Sherrill is going to be handling transparency? And at this point, she's only been in office a couple of not even 2 months yet. How much has she really been able to soak in and fully get a grasp on, and who are the other people who she's leaning on really to come up with some solutions? Go ahead.
Well, look, yes, she's only been in office a short time. A lot of people would say, well, that's not an excuse. But the good thing is she's really surrounded herself by really good people. For instance, her new state treasurer, Aaron Binder, I worked with him when I was in the legislature. For many of his years as a legislative staff member, he was the person who guided the legislature through the budget process. So and he was deputy treasurer under the Murphy administration. So there's nobody who knows the process better, nobody who's a better sounding board for Governor Sherrill than to have Aaron Binder guiding her through this process. And there are so many other good people in the administration. But it's going to come down to her being able to communicate the message that needs to get out there. And, I think that, one of the things that often gets overlooked in this whole budget discussion is that there are no easy choices, and we have to find a way to improve the way New Jersey does this. Education funding, you pointed out, is hard to make transparent because we have this hybrid system that we never really could fix. We have it partially paid for by municipalities through the property tax and partially paid through the state system through the income tax. It's very hard to have an easy explanation that fits all the municipalities to be able to explain that.
So can you talk a little bit about the urgency, need for action in this budget cycle, and what risk could come if they delay reforms?
Well, if you look at, for instance, where we're at with the pension obligations, we are now at a point where the state of New Jersey is making full contributions each year to the pension system. But back 12 years ago, or even longer, when that suddenly became a big concern, it wasn't fixed all at once. It was a gradual process. And I predict that in order to really fix this $3 billion hole, it can't be done in one sitting. It's not something that's digestible in one budget. And so I predict that maybe the outcome is as we go into adopting, as the legislature goes into adopting this budget, maybe the surplus that's carried forward is going to be a little less. That will ease up some room for the governor then to make other changes that will reduce the demand, and she can put together that, close that gap. But she's, the day she gets this budget adopted, she's already got to start making plans for the following year. And the people in the treasurer's office and in the legislature who work on these numbers, they work on it 11 months a year. Maybe they get a couple of weeks after the budget's adopted to stop, but it's a 12-month a year operation.
Don Wisniewski, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's always good seeing you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.
Play it like the New York Sirens. Live in the spotlight. Etch your name in lights. Embrace the noise. And when it calls you, turn it up. Get louder. Play it like they'll hear us everywhere. Because this is our team. New York Sirens. Play it big.